Perennials by Design, Designing with Perennials. I'm really excited about this class. This is actually one of my favorite things, is teaching about, well, plants in general, but I do love perennials a lot, and I don't feel like they're as utilized as they should be. So first thing in learning how to design with perennials is that we need to learn first what a perennial is, and this is something that can be confusing because of the wording. If we look at our definitions here, so perennials, they come back every year, like year after year. They typically die back in the fall and winter, and by die back, it's more of they go dormant. So they don't necessarily die, but they turn brown, and the foliage and things die back to the ground. Usually perennials come in a variety of colors and textures, and then they typically use much less water than annuals in lawn. Annuals don't come back year to year. So annuals are your things in your, if you go to a nursery, they're going to be like petunias, marigolds. What are some other well-known ones? I can't think tonight. Like your sweet potato vine is another really popular one. So they're the ones that are kind of big and bushy and really popular when you go to nurseries, that you can buy in like the flats. Those are your annuals. So those ones do not come back year to year. Most of them will die back once fall comes. If you have your fall annuals, there are more cold hardy ones like pansies and your ornamental cabbage. And then there are some that can reseed themselves, but they're still technically annuals. They typically need watering at least every other day in the ground. They do pretty well. They do pretty well in containers. If they are in containers, they do need a lot more water, just because they're a little bit more root bound. And then there's another kind of subsection of plants called biennials. These ones flower every other year. They're kind of on a every other year life cycle-ish. They die back in fall, winter like perennials, but then they return in the spring with either just foliage or foliage and flowers. So biennials are kind of perennials, but they're also every other year with flowers. So perennials is what we're learning today. So if you just remember perennials, they're the ones that come back year to year. Annuals, they only stay alive for a year. So it can kind of get confusing, but it's good to know the definitions of them. So we're first going to kind of talk about picking the perfect perennial. And that comes with these few things: is choosing a style that you want to go with, checking for insects, figuring out your USDA hardiness zone, reading the plant tags, and then staggering your bloom times in your beds. So first, we're going to talk about choosing a style, and we're going to go over a few of these styles a little bit more in depth. But there's a whole bunch of different kinds of styles, and this probably isn't even all of them. These are just some of my favorites. There's your modern style, Mediterranean, native or low water, English, or shade. So there's a bunch of different types of styles that you can go with. And it's really nice once you have a style, because then like the plants are pretty much picked out for you, because there are certain plants that work with those certain styles. Checking for insects and diseases, you'll want to do this when you're at the nursery. So you can kind of see all the different insects and problems that we're having here. So in the top right corner, we have some spider mites, which can be a big problem if you get those on your plants. And then the next picture over to the left, and then the one below, those are aphids. You see those a lot on roses. The one that it's on in the top picture, that's a lupin. They tend to get them sometimes as well. When you go over, those are some diseases that we see: some root rot, and then some leaf scorch, it looks like. So just making sure that you're checking on the plant, making sure that it's in the best health. Not necessarily that it's like the biggest one, because sometimes the tallest plants or whatever, they may not be as robust as the ones that are shorter. But you do want to make sure that you're checking the roots, make sure nothing is rotting, that you're checking the leaves, make sure nothing is got some disease on it, and then making sure that you're checking for insects. And then you want to figure out your hardness zone. So if you live in Utah, this map on the right tells you what zone you're in dependent upon the color that they have you in. And this is something that you can find on Google. I just Googled the USDA plant hardiness zone of Utah, and this one came up. Most places, once you start getting down into St. George, it gets a little bit warmer, but most places is kind of like in that 5 to 6 zone. It can get pretty cold up in the mountainous areas, but you just want to make sure that you know your zone so that you can pick out the right plants. Reading the plant tags is something that's really important to do when you're at the nursery. This tells you what zone the plant's going to grow in, how tall it's going to get, how wide it's going to get, when it blooms. So knowing how to read these things is really important. Oh, they also show like how much sun they need and then how much water they need. So these plant tags, it's really, really important to make sure that you're reading those when you're at the nursery, especially when you're unsure about the plant. And then also asking the nursery workers, most of them should be pretty knowledgeable. I mean, as far as I've seen, people that work in nurseries, especially ones that are working with the plants, know them pretty well. And then staggering your bloom times, meaning picking different plants that bloom at different times, right? So I have a couple of examples here, but this is kind of a palette of perennials that we have that's blooming from spring to fall. And so this means that you're going to have color all through the season, right? So making sure to stagger the bloom times. So not only picking ones that bloom in the spring or in the fall, you want to make sure you're getting some that bloom in the summer and some that bloom early spring and some that bloom late fall. Some of them will go through the summer and into fall a little bit. But like your early spring ones will only bloom in the spring, and then your fall ones only bloom in the fall. So making sure to have blooms during all that time, you just want to stagger when things are blooming. So the styles I'm going to be going more into depth with today are English gardens, which are pretty much the same as like your cottage gardens, low water / natives type of style, a pollinator style, and then shade garden. So we're going to start out with English gardens. I do want to check on a question here. Oh, Zane or Dave is getting this one. Thank you for doing that. Perfect. So English gardens. So I have a couple of different examples here. English gardens have a pretty distinct look, I would say. I guess all the styles, I mean, to me, I can tell if they're the different kinds, but English gardens in particular, you always can tell if it's an English style garden because they have blooms that are really big or blooms that are on really long stalks, and they have a mixture of those. So these are all really good examples of an English style garden. There we go. So the first plant I want to talk about is delphinium, also known as larkspur. This guy is really awesome, beautiful. I have all these different kinds and I wanted you to be able to see all of them, so I just put the name there, and then I have all the other information about them on the next slide. But these guys are really awesome because they have a spike of flowers, and so they're really good for having something really tall. These guys can also get to be pretty tall in spots. English garden, it's really important to have a lot of color, a lot of big blooms, and a lot of differences in height and size and where things are. So here's some more information about delphinium. Like I said, so the height is pretty variable depending upon the variety that you get. They can get from 1.5 feet to 5 feet tall, depending on which one you decide to go with. And so they're really awesome. Bloom time is May to June. So they are your spring bloomer plant. Shades of blue and white. And then also this red variety, I didn't put red on there, but this one is actually becoming a little bit more popular. We had it in the nursery that I used to work at last year. So that's one that's kind of fun and different. Good thing about these guys is they can take full sun, but then they also do pretty well in part shade as well. So it's really nice because they're pretty good with almost any spot that you can put them. And then water with these guys is medium. The next plant is foxglove, which is another really beautiful spike plant. Really pretty, really unique. I love these guys. Um, they again are one that can get to be pretty tall or stay shorter, so they're good for that kind of height differentiation, but also you can have them shorter as well. And these ones come in a variety of colors, so I've seen them in pinks, yellows, pastel oranges, purples, whites. So they have a whole bunch of different colors that you can get, and then these ones are medium as well. The next one is peonies. These ones are really popular because of their beautiful giant blooms. These guys come in a variety of colors. I love peonies because they're so big and they're just so pretty. I really like peonies. And my mom has a couple in her garden. My grandma loves them as well. So I've always grown up around them. Oh, foxglove is a spring blooming. I didn't mention that one. So this guy, he's a spring blooming, and then peonies are spring blooming as well. So here's a little bit more information. So spring blooming blooms, you can get in a ton of different colors. There's pinks, magentas, reds, corals, whites, purples, yellows, even like mixtures of colors. You can see how we have like a light pink with dark purple, or there's pinks with different shades of pinks in them, or yellow with a little bit of red. So these guys are super fun and different. And these ones do need full sun. These ones are medium with water. And then depending on the variety is going to depend on the size again. Next one I want to talk about are poppies. These guys are really popular because of their big, beautiful blooms. And these ones are really fun. I've been seeing the red ones are, I think, the most popular, just because I feel like they're the ones that you see the most kind of out in the wild, I'd say. They're pretty popular here in Manaway. We have a field of them, and they're super pretty, really beautiful, different kind of shaped flowers, but lots of people don't know that they actually come in a few other colors, which white and pink. And then there's this kind of like pink ruffles one that I saw in one of my neighbor's yards on my grandma's neighbor's house in Logan. And it was awesome. I was like, wow, what's that flower? And it was a poppy, which was awesome. And I think my grandma was able to get a seed head. So we'll see if my grandma ends up with some of those in her yard. And then there's the Icelandic mixture, which are a little bit different, but they're still those big, beautiful blooms. Here's a little bit more about them. So again, they're spring bloomers, dry to medium. These guys can actually take very low water, which is really nice. Like I said, they grow here in Manaway out in a field that gets like zero water at all, and they do spectacularly. So these guys are pretty awesome. So these are kind of late spring, early summer, I'd say, bloomers. Next one is Leucanthemum Shasta daisies. These guys are one of my favorites. We used to have actually a ton of them around the lake in Manaway, but somebody went and mowed all of them down. It was really sad because the one year it was stupendous against the side of an area around the lake. But I love these guys. They're popular for the English garden style because of their big blooms, and it's fun. There's a lot of different varieties that kind of have this they're like fringed kind of a look. They're really fun. The Ulalas and the Luna is one of my favorites. And then a little bit more information. So these guys are kind of early summer bloomers. Pretty much the white is their main color, but they do come in that kind of cream color. If you go to Banana Cream and Luna, it kind of goes to like a yellowish cream. Full sun with these guys, and then these ones are dry to medium as well, so they do pretty well with dealing with a little bit of drought, not too much, but a little bit they can handle. Next one are echinaceas. These ones, again, big beautiful blooms, perfect for English gardens. These ones come in almost every color that you can think of except for blue. I haven't seen a blue one, but pretty much any other color, and even a mixture of colors. These ones are your long bloomers. These bloom from early summer to kind of late summer into fall, I would say. Full sun with these guys, and then dry to medium as well. These ones are able to take a little bit of drought. Next are rudbeckias. These are one of my favorites. They're just really bold, really beautiful, and they're fun because they come in a variety of shapes and colors. These ones are kind of more midsummer to fall blooming. Really pretty. Depending on which one you get will depend on the size of the flower, size of the plant as well. And then these ones are dry to medium as well and full sun. And then asters are really common in English gardens. They're a fall bloomer, so these blooms don't come until fall. And then also with asters, something interesting about them is the bottom half of the aster will kind of start to look really raggedy. And so they're a really good background plant. They're a good one to kind of put behind other things that can kind of hide the bottom of them, because for some reason the bottoms just kind of turn dry while the top of them are these excellent blooms that are super beautiful. So fall blooming, these need full sun. These again are dry to medium. And then height and spread really depends on the variety that you go for. I think that's it for English gardens. So those are just a few. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different plants that you can choose for English gardens, but that kind of gives you an idea of the shape of flower that you're looking for, and also the staggering the bloom time type of thing, because in English gardens especially, you want to have it blooming pretty much all season long. So let's make sure that we're doing okay on questions. Dave's answering one of them. I'll answer Cassie's. Are asters commonly sold in the fall, or can you find them earlier? They're definitely, at the nursery that I worked at, we didn't have them until a little bit later in the summer. We didn't have them early in the spring, not necessarily fall is when we got them, but we didn't have them super early in the spring. When we were getting kind of more of our summer, like our summer order in, is when I saw us get asters. If that helps. And then do you cut them back after they bloom? Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, you do want to wait until they go, like they start to go dormant before you cut them back. So like, I mean, I would cut everything in the fall before it starts. You can cut everything back in the fall before it snows. There are some things you want to be careful with. So you want to make sure that it's okay to cut it back in the fall, because I do know that some things like Agastaki, the hummingbird mint, sometimes you don't want to cut those back in the fall because they sometimes don't do super good through the winter. So keeping those ones during the winter time and then cutting them back in the spring is best to do with the hummingbird mint. But as far as maintenance goes, you can cut them back in the fall time. I wouldn't necessarily cut them back right after they're done blooming. You can, especially your early spring stuff. If it's starting to look really raggedy, I especially the flower heads, I would definitely go in and clean them up, right? So you'd want to go in and clean up the flower heads. If the foliage still looks okay, then keep the foliage. But if it starts to brown when it gets really hot, definitely cut up back those spring ones. I hope that helped with that. Okay, let's keep going here. So our next garden style that I'm going to go over is native/waterwise gardens. And prior to people's beliefs, native and waterwise gardens actually can look really full and luscious and beautiful. They don't have to just be sagebrush and sticks and rocks. So I'm gonna, because we have, I mean, all the examples are low water, and then there's natives kind of in them as well. And I mean, they look beautiful and lush, especially that one down in the right hand corner. I think it would be for you guys. So I really like low water gardens. Yeah, let's talk about some of the plants here. So this one is penstemon or beard tongue. And awesome thing about penstemons is they come in so many different colors, in heights and shapes. And I mean, the flowers themselves are all going to be pretty much the same. They're all really a really long kind of cone-shaped flower, I would say. And these are spring bloomers, so they will only have these blooms during the springtime. But for timing wise, like right now, our penstemons only have their leaves in our garden. So it's April right now, so we haven't even had the blooms yet. So they're gonna not be blooming until a little bit later, which mid-spring to kind of midsummer, yeah, would be a good amount of time for them. Once it starts getting late summer and into fall, the penstemon colors aren't going to be there anymore. Dry to medium, again, like all these plants do pretty well with low water. And then these ones are full sun. Yeah, really fun, really unique, and there's just a lot of different colors and textures that you can play with the penstemons. Next one is, this one is one of my favorites, and this one is more of an early spring bloomer. Not as well known. It is more of a native type of a plant, so it's a little bit harder to get as well. I have found we didn't have any in the nursery that I worked at last year, but they're super pretty if you can get your hands on them. They're early spring to beginning of summer blooming, and they are blue, which is really hard to find that blue color. And so really unique. They're really airy. They get around 2.5 feet tall, and they stay like 1.5 to 2 feet wide. Really pretty. I really like these guys. Low to medium water as well with these ones. This one is Sundancer Daisy, one of my favorites. This one I put in the spring blooming part because it does bloom in the spring, but it's actually one of the longer bloomers. So it'll bloom from like end of April into September. So it blooms for a really long time, and the blooms are so cute. It does stay on the smaller side too, so it's a good one to put kind of in the front areas. And then low water with these guys, full sun. They're super duper awesome. Next one is Nepeta, which is catmint. This is one of my favorite low water plants just because it just gets so bushy and full and beautiful, and has that beautiful light purple color. This one is also a long bloomer, especially if you cut it back, because it kind of has two. You can have it rebloom. So once the blooms will kind of start to look a little bit raggedy, and then you just kind of want to give it like a short haircut, so kind of just trimming off all the flowers, and then it'll rebloom again in a couple of weeks and keep blooming throughout the season. So that's one reason why I really love catmint. You do want to make sure that you're getting the right variety. Depending on whether or not you care, but there is the more species variety does tend to attract cats. You can even, if you wanted to attract cats, you can grow it for that reason. You can dry the leaves even to make kind of like a catnip type of a thing to put in cat toys. So it's good for that. But there's the variety Walker's Low doesn't tend to attract the cats, but the more species one does. Next, we have yuccas, which are super duper awesome. And there's actually quite a few that'll work in our zone here in Layton, and even like in Logan, I saw a few. So, I mean, they're awesome. There's a bunch of different colors and textures and heights and things. And we have a couple even in our garden that you can come and see. These guys are awesome just because they're so unique shaped. They do have more of that kind of deserty look, but then they also look really nice with other plants as well. So down in the right-hand corner with the color guard, you can kind of see the yucca in this more green, luscious looking garden. And it's low water, and then the Rebecca is low water, and it looks even like there might be a penstemon there in the background, which is also low water. So you can have it in a setting that's a little bit more luscious and not have it look out of place just because they're so unique and awesome that way. Depending on which one you get, it's going to depend again on the size. They can get pretty tall, especially with the flowers. Some of them, the flowers will get up to be around like 6 to 12 feet, which is amazing if like you let it do that, because it does look quite spectacular. Blooming time is usually in the summer. Blooms kind of range in a white to cream, light yellowish color. These ones do need to be planted in full sun, and then low. They can tolerate a little bit more water, but they do better with low water. Next one are your yarrows. And despite what you may have heard, yarrows are actually super awesome. You do want to be careful. There is a native yarrow to Utah that does spread like wildfire, and you do want to kind of keep away from that guy just because it spreads so easily. But these more of the cultivated colored types, they don't tend to spread. And they're super awesome because they have these amazing colors, and then kind of that unique foliage that looks kind of wispy and silvery even. A little bit more information about them. These ones are long bloomers, June to September, which is awesome because it's so nice to have color during the summer. Blooms, they come in reds, yellows, whites, pinks. Full sun with these guys, dry to medium. Height's going to depend on the variety again, but they can get to be around 3 feet tall and around 2.5 feet wide. Yeah, yarrows are awesome. I really like yarrows a lot. Next one is this butterfly weed. This one's more of a native. This one can spread a little bit, but it's really awesome just because of how low water it can tolerate. And it has a nice shape, really pretty blooms. And I think I've seen a couple that I saw in the catalog the other day of one that's more of like a pink color even, which I haven't seen before. So that's kind of fun and different. These ones are long bloomers as well for the summertime. Yeah, these ones are really fun. Next are your hummingbird mints or your hyssops, agastaches. These guys are really nice. They do come in a variety of shapes, colors. These ones have a really strong scent that I like it a lot. It's really unique. These ones are nice. They have a different shape than most flowers you see, which is nice because they do provide a different kind of texture to a garden. A little bit more about them. They're long bloomers as well. So they're kind of like June to September blooming, dry to medium. These ones are more like they'll tolerate low water really well. Full sun with these guys. Depending on, again, the variety is going to depend on the size. Hyssops are one of my favorites. I guess I say that almost with everyone, but it's because it's true. I do like so many of these. So Blank Flower is the next one. I actually just planted some seeds for this one in my parents. We're going to see how they do. I don't know if I planted them early enough. I planted them before it snowed and rained so that they could get some moisture on them. These guys are awesome. They are more of a mounded shape, which is nice. So it kind of is nice to kind of have this mound of these kind of daisy shaped flowers in your low water landscape. They're nice because they come in kind of a variety of your reds and yellows palette, which is nice. Really beautiful. More information about them. There are ones that stay pretty small too, so you can kind of stagger if you want some of the taller ones in the back or some of the shorter ones in the front. Really long blooming as well. Full sun and then dry to medium. Next are garas. These guys are super awesome. We have quite a few of these in our garden. Really pretty. These have a really airy type of a feel to them. They do tend to stay in those pinks and white kind of colors, but they're really pretty. I really love these guys. They're really long blooming as well, and they can tolerate that low water. And you can get ones that are a little bit a shorter variety, but then there are ones that get a little bit on the bigger side as well, which it's nice to have kind of that variation in sizes depending on where you want to put them. Zauschneria is the next one. This is another one of my many favorites. This one's really awesome. It stays shorter, which is nice, and then it kind of spreads a little bit more. They have that really beautiful kind of trumpet-shaped flower. And then they're just this really intense red. And these guys, the water on them is dry. They really like not having a lot of water on them. These ones bloom for quite a long time as well. And it's nice because they just kind of become this blanket of red on the ground because they don't get to be very tall. So these ones are really awesome. And I found this pink variety. I've never seen it in person, but I want to see if I can find it somewhere this year and maybe try them out because it'd be cute and different. All right, so that's it for our native / low water.
At the end, can you hear me now?
I think we're doing pretty good on questions, thanks to Dave. And next we're going to go to pollinator gardens. So I don't have individual slides of plants for this one. I have a lot of different examples here of some pollinator plants that are really popular. And a lot of the plants we've talked about are really popular for pollinators. And so I'm just going to go over these ones. These are the popular shapes that you want to go for when you're looking for flowers for a pollinator garden. So we went over all of these plants, your cone flowers, anything with like that kind of cone of area where like a bee can land and go through the little things to get the pollen. So your gaillardia is the same way. I didn't put like leucantha or Shasta daisies are like that. Anything with that trumpet shaped. If you think about the type of pollinator you want to go for, it'll depend on the different plant that you want to go for. So if you're thinking about like hummingbirds and butterflies, so hummingbirds have those really long beaks, so they're going to really love your trumpet shaped flowers, and then your butterflies will like that as well because they kind of have that little thing that I don't know the name of that they can stick inside those. And then anything with that kind of, it's called umbel, is a yarrow, that's an umbel shaped flower head, and the butterfly weed as well. That just has a lot of surface area for the bug to crawl on the insect or to be able to get the pollen. So that's our pollinator section, just because we've gone over so many of the plants that are really popular for pollinator gardens as well. So Dave has informed me that some people have their hands raised. If you have a question, if you just put it in the Q&A box, we're not going to be doing, we're not using the raised hand one just because we have material that we need to get through. So if you have a question, please put it in that Q&A box and either me or Dave will be able to get to that. All right, so the next gardens we're going to go over are shade gardens. And these ones are actually one of my favorites because I don't feel like a lot of people realize how much they can do with their shade. So let's get going here. So the first plant I want to go over are ferns. These guys are super duper awesome because they do so well in the shade. Like at my grandma's house, there's an area that's completely shaded, and I never see sun at all, but she has ferns in there, and every single year they just come up, and they're the super tall ones too. So they come up and they cover her whole like porch area, and it just fills this bed that's in complete full shade. And so I really like ferns. My parents have always had some in their gardens as well. So they're awesome. And in working at the nursery that I worked at, I saw a couple of these different kinds that were really unique, like the ghost fern and the lady in red were ones that I saw, and they were so unique and so cool looking. So to be able to have those kind of different colors and textures and things in the midst of all the green in your shade, it'd be awesome to be able to have all that stuff. So ferns are really awesome. Here's some more information about them. So they don't really have any blooms, but their foliage come late spring. So they're fun because you'll kind of start to see them starting to come out of the ground. They kind of come in this little like kind of like a fruit roll up, and then they kind of roll up out of the ground. It's really cool if you ever watch one kind of growing up out of the ground. And then they do well in part to full shade. So these guys you don't want to put in any full sun at all because they will burn. But this is our shade garden. So everything's going to do really well in either part or full shade. Next one are bleeding hearts. These ones are a really old plant, but they are really awesome, I think. I think they're really beautiful. My grandma has them in her garden, and every year they just look so pretty, and they're awesome too because they do like pretty well in whatever situation you put them in. Because I've seen them, they have there's a section over, if you've ever been to the Logan LDS temple, there's a corner where they have them, and it just grows so big and beautiful every single year. But then my grandma's garden, she has them in this really teeny tiny plant bed, but it still like grows. It doesn't get as big, but it grows kind of to the size of that bed, and it still looks really healthy and really nice. But they're awesome because I feel like they can do pretty well wherever you put them. If it's in the shade, if they're in the sun, they tend to really struggle, but they're fun because, I mean, the pink one was the one that I saw most when I was little, but I've recently been more introduced to the red and the white one, and then this one with the golden colored leaves is really cool too. So depending on the ones, they do stay a little bit on the bigger side, so 2 to 3 feet. I'd even say like sometimes pushing 3.5 feet tall with some of them. Bloom time is kind of your early spring, and then they kind of just turn into like they kind of, they don't shrivel up, but they do kind of get crusty and things, especially in the hot summer. So there are ones that are good for like kind of a background plant that you can put, that's going to be the first thing to kind of get pretty and big, and then everything else starts growing around it, and then you can just kind of let it kind of die back to the ground for next year. Let's see. Yeah, these guys are awesome. I really like bleeding hearts. Next are columbines. These ones are early spring as well. You see a lot of these up in the mountains. Usually they're like either a white or a blue color, the ones in the mountains here. But they do come in a variety of colors and shapes and things. And I mean, this isn't even half of what is available out there. There's so many different kinds of columbines, and they're all so beautiful. These are early spring as well, so they will die back to the ground coming May into June, I'd say. But they're really pretty, and some of them can get to be pretty large as well, so they're another good one for kind of a background type of a plant. Next one is bug loss, which I feel like a lot of people don't know about. It looks a little bit like forget-me-nots. I think it's really cute, and they're fun because they have this really unique foliage as well, which does stay during the rest of the season, not just spring, because the flowers will come in springtime. But the foliage will stay, which is really cool because it kind of adds that silvery sheen to a shade garden that doesn't have a lot of color. But yeah, I really like these guys, and they're really unique and they look really cool. There was a lot of these, and I used to work in Colorado, and there would be a lot of these in people's gardens, and every time I was like, that's so pretty. I love it. So these guys are cool. I like these ones a lot. I'm just going to check. Okay, we're doing good with questions. Dave's answering them. Good. Okay. Oh. Here we go. Next one is called Lady's Mantle, which is another one I don't feel like a lot of people know about. This one's really fun, and it's known more for its foliage than its flowers. It does get these cute little yellow flowers, but they, again, bloom kind of late spring, early summer. But then the rest of the season, they're just kind of this bushy green plant. And they're really cool, especially because they're ones that can tolerate a little bit of water on them. And then when they do get water on them, the water kind of pools on the leaves. The leaves are kind of fuzzy, so the water will like get little droplets on the kind of fuzzy parts of the leaves, which is really cool looking. And then they're just like a nice mounded shape, which is, I don't know, I think it creates a really nice look for a shade garden. And then they're just kind of that rich lime green kind of a color. Next is false spirea or astilbes. These ones are super awesome. They are spring bloomers, and they do they stay in that color palette of pink to white and kind of purple. I haven't seen a lot of the purple variety. There isn't any other, like, I don't think there's any other darker colors of purple. They're more on like that magenta color side. But these are super duper fun and different looking too. They have that fun different shaped leaf also. These are pretty fun. These ones, I have bloom time on here is June to August. I would say that they're more of like spring to maybe early or midsummer. I haven't seen them do super duper well into August, but they're cool. I really like these guys. Next are hostas, and these ones are known more for their foliage and their flowers, and they're fun because depending upon the one you get, there's ones that can get to be really large and there's some that can stay smaller. And they're just really cool because they can take up a really big area, and then they have these really unique shaped leaves. And then actually the flowers aren't horrible. Actually, they smell quite good. And then the flowers are really nice for pollinators as well, which is a plus. And so like I said, depending on the one that you get, it can range from the height of 1 to 5 feet and then spread 1 to 6 feet. So you want to make sure that you're reading the plant tags with any of these plants, and especially any that I've said like variable in height. If you want it to be a certain height, make sure to read that plant tag, because depending on the variety, it's really going to depend. Bloom time is usually July to August, and the blooms are usually either white or kind of like a light purple kind of color. And then these guys are ones that you don't really want getting any of your, like it's full to part shade. Part shade though, you don't want it to ever be in the sun that's like your afternoon sun that's scorching hot, because the leaves on these will start to scorch if they get anywhere near too warm on them. So they really do best in full shade. They can take part shade, but it's more of like early morning sun and maybe evening, like late evening sun. Next are coral bells, which are probably in the list of like top favorite plants. I have a lot of favorite plants and I have a lot of top favorite plants, but like these ones are maybe even above those, just because they're so variable, and they're really nice because they provide color for your shade garden, because there's not a lot of perennials that will bloom in the summertime for a shade. But these guys have foliage that are these different colors, which can bring that color look to your shade garden. And then they do have blooms as well. The blooms aren't as well known for like their foliage are, but they're cool. They're mounded shaped, and then their flowers kind of stick up above their foliage and are just kind of like, well, hence the name bells. They kind of look like little bells on little sticks. They do come in a variety of color with their foliage. So, I mean, purples, reds, greens, yellows, dark purples, orange, a mixture of colors, more like silvery colors, like kind of like a yellow-green color, or there's like a dark purple green. I guess it's kind of like the obsidian, but it's a little bit more on the green side. I don't know. There's tons of different colors. Super fun to play with. And then blooms, they come in a range of like pinks, corals, reds, whites, cream. They don't get anywhere past those, but like some of them, even the blooms will contribute to their beauty. Like the spearmint I have there is this brilliant pink bloom, and then that silvery kind of green foliage. So these guys are really awesome, and they're great for shade because they provide that color where color is not very prevalent. And this one is Ligularia. I have a hard time with that word. Also known as leopard plant. This one's not as well known. I haven't seen it a lot in people's gardens, And it was the first time I had ever seen it when I worked at the nursery last year. But these ones are super awesome because they get these blooms in the summertime. And then they have really unique foliage that you can get this either burgundy color or it's more of like a dark green or kind of a mixture. So the Brit Marie Crawford is kind of a mixture, but the barbecue banana is more of like the burgundy, and then Bottle Rocket's more of like a green. And so these guys are fun. They were different. It was something that last year when it bloomed, I was like, that's so pretty. I've never seen that before. And in a shade garden in the summertime, this kind of foliage with those bright yellow blooms, wonderful. It'd be so pretty. But then with these guys, water is medium to high. So most of these have been kind of medium water, but this one can tolerate a little bit higher of water and might even do better with high water, especially in the hot summer months. But medium to high I put on there. And then also with these guys, you want to make sure that you're checking the height, because like the Bottle Rocket, there's another one that I think that has a rocket in its name that gets even taller. That kind of it gets to that kind of 4-foot range. So they can get pretty big. So you do want to make sure you're checking the plant tags for the sizes, especially. So we've gone over all the different styles now and all the different kind of perennial ideas for those styles. We do have another perennials class coming up that Dave will teach, and that'll go a little bit more into some other perennials as well. But those are just some ideas to get you kind of started and get you looking at kind of what you're wanting and things. Let's check on our questions to make sure we're doing okay. Looks like Dave's getting them. Wonderful. But now I'm going to kind of go over maintenance of your plant beds. This is something that a lot of people are worried about making plant beds because they're worried the maintenance is going to go up super high with taking care of them. And it's really not that much maintenance. I'd say the most maintenance for plant beds is, I think, in the spring. So I'm working in the gardens right now at the Learning Garden at the Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District. And I've been doing spring cleanup right now. I mean, that garden is big, so it's taking me forever. But if you just have like 3 beds at your house, it's not going to take very long to do these few things. So this is kind of the expected maintenance that you're going to see I'm going to do for spring, summer, and fall. So spring maintenance, fertilizing is, you want to think about if you're doing like organic matter and things mixed into the soil, you usually don't have to fertilize a ton. But you do want to make sure that you have some good nutrients and things in your soil. So making sure to put some organic matter in there, or getting some compost and mixing it in with your soil. Just kind of getting, like, continuing to put in nutrients to the soil. Spring cleanups, that's going to be cleaning up perennials, raking out leaves out of your beds, cutting things back. So a lot of the perennials that I didn't get cut back in the fall, I've been cutting them back. Staying on top of the weeds, applying a pre-emergent can help with this. You do kind of want to be careful if you're planning on things reseeding themselves, because some of the plants will have seeds that if you're wanting it to spread a ton, then if you put pre-emergent on, it's going to not let those seeds grow as well as the weed seeds. But pre-emergent can help with your weed seeds. Watering a drip will help prevent the weed growth as well. You're going to have weeds in the spring. That's something that you just want to expect because you've had liquid on your plant beds all winter long, right? So just expect the weeds in the springtime, but if you're staying on top of them, it's actually not too bad. Even in like the giant garden that I'm working in, the worst place is the water tank right now, but that area, there's just a lot of gravel and things there, and it's an area that we do have a lot of like seedage. But the other plant beds, it's not actually horrible. Like, I weed for maybe like an hour every day, and it's not horrible. Like, and staying on top of it. But then when summer comes, the weeds aren't even going to be that bad because we have drip going to most of our things. So making sure to stay on top of the weeds is something that's really important. This is the second best time to plant if you're wanting to plant anything. It is a good time to do it. I'd say fall is probably the best, but springtime is the second best time. And then also checking your irrigation. That's something that's really important, not only your irrigation for your plant beds, but also for your lawn areas if you have it for that. Making sure that it's working correctly, that all your plants are getting the water that they are needing. So next, in the summer, so you can deadhead to encourage more blooms. That's one thing that you can be doing in the summertime. Again, staying on top of the weeds. You could potentially reapply a pre-emergent. You want to be careful during like the hotter months that you're not doing this as much. But if you have really bad weeds, you could maybe do this. You just want to make sure you're not applying during the hottest part of the day, and then before the wind picks up is something that you want to do. Not the best time to plant just because of the heat. It's harder to stay on top of water because when you plant perennials, well, when you plant anything new into your plant beds, it does need a little bit more water to get established. And so staying on top of watering if you're planting in the summer can be a little bit more tough because of those high temps. And then fall maintenance, cutting back and cleaning up plants as they die back to the ground. And then maybe raking leaves out before winter. And then staying on top of the weeds. Again, with cutting back, there are a few exceptions. You want to make sure that you understand the plants that you're using. Most of them are good to be cut back in the fall, but there are some that are a little bit more kind of like diva-ish, I guess would be the word that I would use. They're just a little bit more tender, so they don't do as well if you are cutting them and then they kind of have open wounds for the winter. And again, staying on top of the weeds. That's like the main thing, is that if you see that things are getting a little bit weedy, just go out there and pull the weeds when they're small. That's the best time to get them. Or if it rains one day, get out there and weed, because that's going to be the easiest time to get them. So that's as far as it is for maintenance. That's pretty much it. Like, not even that bad, I think. I don't know. Maybe that's bad for some people, but it's not that much to take care of. And you'll have a beautiful garden too, and it'll look nice with all your new perennials. So that's all the material that I have for the class.
Can
yes.
you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. We figured it out. My volume was muted on my laptop. That's why I couldn't hear him, which is funny. But yeah.
So there's a question. There's a few questions in here, I think, just to answer verbally.
Yeah.
One is from Erin on tips for laying out the planting bed, kind of the design principles. If you want to look at that question and maybe address that one.
Yeah. So as far as laying out the planting bed, you can kind of decide your own kind of flair and style. We do have the Localscapes design class that we go a little bit more in depth on the design part of the class. But yeah, you can do tall in the back. How close together is going to depend on the size of the plant gets, right? So if we have a plant that spreads to 1.5 feet, that has a diameter of 1.5 feet, right? So the next plant, so you want to put the next plant, I mean, it also depends on how dense you want your plant bed to be, because if you want it to be super dense, then you're going to be putting plants. So if you have a plant that gets to be 1.5 feet wide, that means the next plant you're going to put, so you got to go off like the radius of 1.5. So 1.5 in diameter is going to be like 0.75 or whatever. You probably don't need to be that specific in radius. And then the next plant, you're going to need another 0.5 radius, right? So spread wise is going to be kind of how far apart you plant them. So if you have 1.5 foot spread, then 1.5 foot, you're going to put another plant, right? But then if you want them to not be as close, then maybe plant them 2 feet apart, right? So it kind of depends on how densely you want it planted and then the look that you're going for. You can put tall in the back. I wouldn't put anything short in the back just because you don't see it unless you can see that bed from another angle, right? So if you have a bed where it's something that you can walk all the way around the bed, maybe you have tall stuff kind of in the middle of the bed, and then you have shorter things on the outside, right? So yeah, I hope that helped answer that question. All right, any help for eliminating morning glory? This one, morning glory is the bane of all people's existence because it is so hard to get rid of. It's one of those ones that if you don't get all the roots, it will grow again. So as far as eliminating it, I don't know if that's completely possible. It is possible to continue pulling it out and trying your hardest to get rid of it. But I mean, it is a broadleaf, and so it will work to spray a broadleaf herbicide on it. But I mean, with my experience with morning glory, it's pretty hardy against any kind of herbicides, any kind of pulling it out and things. So just keeping on top of it, especially noticing it. I've found a couple of spots in the garden where it's been pretty small. So I've tried to just kind of dig down as far as I could to get as many of the roots before it gets bigger and starts spreading, because it just so easily spreads. Another tip would be not letting it go to flower, because it will reseed itself. But yeah, I hope that helps. Morning glory is awful. Next.
Yeah, and I could add a little bit to that one.
Yeah, please do.
If you have a major problem with morning glory, you do need to use herbicide. There is no organic method to get rid of it. It'll just continue to come back. The roots are very deep. If it's gone to seed, the seeds can remain viable for years and years and years in the soil. So it's morning glory isn't a one-time kill. It's a constant effort to stay on top of it. And then over time, you'll weaken it. If you can, don't till it. Whatever you do, those little root nodules and stuff, if you till it, it just breaks them apart and each one of those grow. And so digging it though, if you dig with a shovel, chop it off and remove that as much root as you can, that slows it down. So remember, plants are photosynthesizing. They're taking sugars from the leaves down into the roots. So if you can continually eliminate foliage, you'll eventually weaken it such that you can get rid of it. But it's a constant approach, usually applying a broadleaf weed killer, like Hattie Ann said, multiple times over and over again, year after year for several years, you get it under control. But there's no easy approach.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dave. But yeah, it's going to be a process for many years to come. What can I use to kill grass in my flower beds? I mean, Roundup will work. Don't do any broadleaf herbicides. That's for more of your, I guess, broadleaf plants, right? But they won't work on grasses. So Roundup can work. You want to be careful though, because if you have perennials and things, Roundup will also kill them. So, I mean, it might be best, especially right now, a lot of the grass that you're seeing is an annual grass. So like right now in the gardens, I've been finding annual bluegrass in some of the beds. So as soon as I see it, I pull it out. You don't want those grasses to go to seed. But as soon as you get them out of the ground, they'll be gone. So yeah, Roundup, I would say, but just be careful to not spray anything else. And then also just pulling it out as soon as you can. One thing to help keep grass out of your beds is making sure that, especially if you have a plant bed that grass is on the other side of your plant bed, you want to make sure that you have a barrier between there, because grasses, that some of them will spread by seed, but some of them spread by rhizomes as well. And so they can creep into your plant beds that way as well. So making sure to have a divider between your plant beds and your grass is a tip there. Anything else you would add, Dave?
There is, if you're not opposed to herbicides, I cannot remember the name of it, but there is a selective herbicide that will kill grass and not broadleaf plants, but I don't remember the name of it. You just check at your local nursery and ask, say, I've got this grass problem, it's in with my perennials and so forth. What is it? And there is one selective herbicide for grass, if you're not opposed to those. Yeah, I don't remember the name of it either. Otherwise, it's just it's one of those efforts too. It's constant. You dig it out. You kind of, try to create the barrier, like Hetty Ann said, and you dig it out. It's a fight as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I hope that helped. Thank you. Okay. How is the best way to deadhead? So let's see if I have anything that can be an example. I'll use this pencil. So I don't know if you can see my pencil. Let me stop sharing my screen so I can be a little bit bigger. Okay, so if my pencil's a flower, so let's say that this eraser is the flower head, and this green part is my stem, and then this part is kind of my foliage, right? So we have my plant here. The flower has died back and you want a deadhead. So you want to take your pruners. Some plants are tender enough that you can even just like pinch it off with your fingernails, but usually you use pruners. So you want to take that down, and then you want to go down the stem. It's usually best to cut all the way down, like as far as you can into the foliage. Some of them will be more okay with kind of more of a really quick haircut, like the catmints will be okay with that. But more of like your bigger blooms, your Shasta daisies, coneflowers, those type of things, when you deadhead those, you do want to get down on the stem as far as you can to the base of the plant and cut it down there. I think. Anything else you would add to that, Dave? I think that's.
No, yeah, I think you're fine. You've done fine with that one.
Okay.
Some of it depends on the type of plant. Some plants, you don't even have to be careful one stem at a time. You can grab the whole clump and cut them in groups. You don't worry too much for the most part. I think that's maybe what people worry about is, am I going to hurt the plant? Am I going to damage it? No, you're not. As long as you stay. Hetty Ann commented on this. You don't want to cut plants all the way to the ground when you're deadheading. It's usually just the flower part down to the first set of leaves or the second set of leaves or something below the flower, and you're good.
Yeah, sweet, thanks. Next one, what kind of fertilizer do you use? I'm gonna be honest, I don't use a ton of fertilizers in my plant beds. I do more of composting and organic matter, just because they have a lot of nutrients in them. So I don't have a ton of experience with types of fertilizers that you can put in the plant beds. We did put I can't remember, I think it was like a sulfur-based fertilizer once in one of the plant beds that I worked in when I worked for the Logan Temple grounds. But that was because we were planting annuals in the bed. So I don't know, what kind of fertilizers, Dave, have you seen best used in plant beds? Because I don't know a ton of the good ones.
Yeah, I answered this question a couple times and I left this one because it's being asked several times. I think generally just a general garden fertilizer. So it's, your numbers on the bag are going to be the same. 8, 16, 16, 16, just a good general broad, and this is if you're using a granular fertilizer. You can buy it at any nurseries. It doesn't matter what brand. It's just a general, it has equal amounts of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And so for flowering plants, that's why you would use the potassium and phosphorus. The nitrogen is for green. And that's why kind of that general 888, 16 type fertilizer is just good. I don't think you need to fertilize unless you see a need. If your plants are doing fine and everything seems to be growing well, don't worry about fertilization. If things seem really stunted, they're not growing, they're looking a certain way, that's when you would maybe consider using a fertilizer and applying something to get it going. Some of that's soil-based, of course, if your soils are just terrible. But if things look good, don't worry. You don't need to add extra fertilizer. Only fertilize when you know there's a need.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. Perfect. Okay, let's go to the next one. So how do you plant seeds? Do you germinate first? How deep, etc.? Usually with perennials, there aren't a ton that you can grow. Well, I haven't seen a ton that you grow from seed. There's only a few that I've seen that seed really well. But most of them, it's more, you get them as a plant, just because some of them take a little bit longer to like germinate and things. So, but one of them, if you do plant it by seed, one that does pretty well is Gaillardia. That was the one that we talked about, that was the yellows and reds colors. Those ones do seed pretty well. And as far as like depths and things, I've never germinated them first. And like even in the garden, we have some that I cut back in like March, and I just found some baby ones that were growing from the seeds that had kind of fallen off when I'd cut them back. So I didn't even plant them in the soil. They just kind of were on the top of the bark and kind of gotten moved around and things. So as far as depth, not super deep, I don't think, at least not with those ones. And I did not germinate them first. I haven't done a ton of planting by seed with perennials myself. So I don't know a ton about them. I don't know if you know a little bit more, Dave, about perennials and growing them from seed.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of people will grow them from seed indoors, and then they get the plant started just in a little container because it's a little easier to manage moisture and that kind of thing in a little teeny pot. I mean, that's how nurseries do it. Wholesale nurseries grow these from tiny little, in containers, sell it to nurseries, you buy it and transplant it. But if you have seeds, there's no reason you can't start them outdoors. Sometimes, like Hattie Ann said, it's just, sometimes it's a little easier, just you have a little more control over the soil, the moisture. It's a little easier sometimes to gauge the depth that you're planting your seeds and so forth. Always follow the instructions on a little packet. They'll usually tell you how deep to germinate or how deep to seed it. And then, it's half an inch down or an inch or quarter inch, something. And then from there, of course, you can keep it moist, get it started, and then transplanting perennials is easy. And so, but it's up to you. If you don't want to bother with the little pots and stuff, certainly wait till the soils kind of warm up a little bit, wait for things to start going, and then get them started from seed outside and just kind of watch them. They will certainly root in well, they'll be well established, and you'll be successful.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Next one, how do you kill marshmallow plant? I am not familiar with marshmallow plant, Dave. I'm guessing it's a common name for a weed.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if she's referring to the mallow. There's the weed that's called mallow. It kind of has that big leaf. We used to call them cheesies when we were growing up.
Okay,
the cheesy weed, and as kids we would even eat those seeds. You peel them apart and you eat them.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's what she's talking about. And it's a big tap-rooted plant, big kind of broader leaves. You kill it with any way you kill any other broadleaf weed. You use a broadleaf weed killer, or you dig out that big taproot.
Yeah.
And they're pretty easy to manage. They're actually pretty sensitive to herbicide, the broadleaf weed killers. So if it doesn't get enough, it'll kill the top and then it'll regrow from that taproot. But apply it again, you'll get it. And there was a suggestion from one of the viewers. Sometimes timing of when you spray, fall is actually a really good time to spray for weeds because they're drawing down the sugars from the leaves into the roots. So they're drawing everything down into that root. So if there is an herbicide there, it'll draw it into that root and kill it maybe a little more effectively than in the spring when they're pushing everything upwards out of the root. But, that's just something to consider as well.
Sweet. Thanks, Dave. Next question. Are any of these toxic to pets, children, or deer? I actually don't know the answer to that question. As far as I know, there's not any. I do know that there are some plants that are toxic to animals, and I'm guessing children as well. I don't know. I think it's rhododendrons, but I don't think they grow here. There might be a shrub that can grow, but as far as I know, I don't think that they're toxic. Most of these are deer. Well, I guess not most of them, but some of them are deer like repellent type of plants that you can put in there that deer tend to stay away from. But as far as I know, not any of the ones that I talked about are toxic. I don't know. I mean,
there was only one that lupins, you mentioned lupins, I think lupins can create, not all of them, but lupins can create a what they call an alkaloid toxin. Won't kill an animal, but it could make you sick. It's just enough toxicity to potentially make an animal or a person sick if it was ingested. But again, you'd have to look at the varieties because not all of them are. But some people, you could get a little worried. For the most part, everything that Hattie Ann talked about tonight, it's not going to have toxins or things. I mean, usually you're not eating your perennials. Pets, for the most part, usually aren't either. I don't know of any cases. I've never heard of any cases where any of the plants talked about tonight were an issue for anybody that I know.
Yeah, same. All right. Next question. We do have a good suggestion from one of our attendees about helping with morning glory and the grass in the bed. So I don't know what quinclorac is, but it's probably another kind of something to help. She says it helps with morning glory, and then speed zone for the grass, which sounds familiar to me, speed zone. And then just looking in your nurseries to find the things that will help with the weeds. They'll have some good ones at the nurseries to be able to help with your weeds in your perennial beds.
Yeah, quinclorac is just a type of an herbicide. It's often mixed for crabgrass control and some of the annual grasses inside of a lawn, but it can work, of course, for the other broadleaf weeds as well. It's quite common ingredient in some of the other, herbicides or brand name things that you'll buy.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Next one. Do you have to divide perennials after a few years for them to continue to do well? If so, what time of year is best? No, actually, I haven't. I mean, there are some that you can divide. You want to be careful because not all of them will do well with being divided. But typically, you don't have to divide them for them to continue to do well. I mean, I've seen perennials in beds that have been there for years. So, I mean, it might depend on the type. You might just have to ask about that at the nursery if there's a plant that has like specific needs that it needs to be divided after a while, or it's going to need to be replaced. But as far as I know, I haven't seen that they have to be divided to continue to do well. Let's see. Oh, Cindy says foxglove is toxic, which yes, it is. Thank you, Cindy. I'd forgotten about that one. Oh, and then also I was thinking butterfly weed. It has that kind of milky substance like dandelions will get. And that milky stuff, I think, can tend to make people kind of sick as well. Yeah, foxglove is toxic. I'd forgotten about that one. Thank you, Cindy. And then we just have another one about speed zone, about how it's good. So yeah, speed zone is a good one. But as far as questions go, I think that's most of them. But yeah, we thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the class. It was something that I really enjoyed preparing and that I enjoy teaching. I really love perennials, and I think that they do add a lot to a bed. But yeah, if there's any other questions, just put it in that Q&A box. But other than that, I think we're pretty much done here, unless you have anything else, Dave.
No, good job. Yeah, thanks, Hattie Ann, for teaching us. If there's questions, certainly send us an email. Hattie Ann's always willing to, both of us are willing to answer emails. You can give us a call. And now that it's starting to get nice weather, come out to the learning garden. If you're around Layton area or something, or it's not that far from most places in Davis or Weber County. So come walk around a little bit. You'll start to see the garden is designed just like Hattie Ann was talking about. It's designed so you get seasonal change. So if you see it once, you've seen a snapshot, a couple of months later, it's going to look different because there's going to be different things in bloom. It's going to have a different look, different focal points. So certainly come, multiple times. We'd encourage you. You're welcome. It's open to the public. So come and see us up there.
Sweet. We have one more question. Asking about our spring fair. So unfortunately this year we are not having our spring fair, which is sad. We are going to have like an event in the fall, but spring fair not this year, unfortunately. Hopefully next year. And then Dave's typing this, but the recording and PowerPoint will be available to you. Yes, they should be up on our website pretty soon. I mean, I'll put the PDF files up on our website right after this class. And then as far as the recording goes, it should be up the next couple of days or so. So that will be available, yes. As far as the Learning Garden, it is at our facility, the Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District. So if you look that up, I don't know the exact.
I can give the address. It's 2837 East, Highway 193 in Layton. So it's kind of up on the east side, right by Highway 89, and on the road, the Highway 193 that goes east and west, just south of Hill Air Force Base. Yeah. You're on that road all the way basically to Highway 89. We're on the north side of 193 right there. You'll see a sign, and you're welcome to come in there. It looks a little restricted because we do have a water treatment plant facility on that site as well, but it is open to the public, so please come. Again, I'll say it again. It's 2837 East, Highway 193. If you didn't get that, the address is on our website. I mean, we should post things up here. I wish we had a little better way to post information, but all this information is on our website. We link the presentations back up there. You know, we're trying to share this, trying to keep the information available for everybody. But certainly, if there's something you can't find, call us, and we'll try to direct you to a resource and direct you to information.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay, I'll let that. We're being asked about in-person classes. Hopefully, we don't have an exact date on when we're going to be hopefully getting back to them. But it is something that we have talked about. But as far as right now, we're kind of going month to month, just kind of seeing how things are going with vaccines and numbers and things. So it's kind of up in the air. Hopefully, for sure by next year, right? Maybe, hopefully, crossing our fingers.
One thing to throw out there is, the governor there's no mask mandate anymore statewide, but state entities are still doing masks and kind of limited in size of groups and so forth. So if things continue to trend downward with COVID as far as the numbers and so forth, it's possible by sometime in June to July that we may be able to offer an in-person class again, but don't hold us to that. Things can change quickly. They have over the last year. We're optimistic though, based on the trend, that by later this summer, our classes kind of taper off. July, we have only a few, but maybe by the time they ramp up again in August and September for the fall things, hopefully we'll be doing some in-person. We'll probably do hybrid classes at that point where we have some in-person and virtual options to kind of meet both needs. But yeah, we're hoping for in-person as well. It's a lot funner to teach those. Well, for me, it is anyway.
Great. We'll wait a couple seconds for any other questions, but otherwise.
Was there one question about tulip and daffodil maintenance?
Yeah, I did. I answered that one,
okay.
But I can answer it over this as well. Just they asked about cutting it back and when to cut it back and things. But,
okay.
Yeah, so I'd say just cut back the flower stems when they're done blooming or the petals and things have fallen off. So you can cut back the stem. I would leave the leaves for as long as you can, just so they can get as much photosynthesis as they can. It'll put the energy in the bulb. But once the leaves start to brown and things, you want to cut it back to the ground.
Yep. Okay, well done, Hetty-Ann.
Awesome. Sweet.
Go ahead and wrap it up. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Have a nice night.